Happy Halloween, Jets fans. What's spookier than Winnipeg sitting pretty at first place in the NHL? Well, a pair of interesting upcoming games for the weekend could put the Jets either a little bit further ahead in the race for first place, or maybe they have a little bit of a stumble. Let's chat about which direction the Jets are going on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, we're going to chat about a couple of upcoming games for the Jets, and ultimately, the month ahead, obviously this is the last day of October, so coming up in November is going to be a very interesting stretch. American Thanksgiving is typically considered the deadline for teams that are firmly looking for a playoff spot at that point. If you are not in a playoff spot and you're not that close, a lot of teams tend to have trouble making up that ground. But that's not the position the Jets are likely to find themselves in. Winnipeg, against all odds, and somehow is first in the league right now, 18 points. They are 3 points clear of, or actually 2 points clear of the next closest team, and they've only played 10 games compared to some of the other squads that have around a similar points total. So the Jets already at 18 points, just 10 games into the season, best ever start in franchise history, and things are looking up. But that doesn't mean that they can rest on their laurels. Their next two opponents might be a little bit trickier than you'd expect. Coming up, of course, on Friday, tomorrow is going to be Columbus on the road, and then the Jets return home for a pretty difficult afternoon game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So in just a moment, we're going to talk about what to expect from these games and why Columbus may be a little bit peskier than you'd expect. But before we go any further, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, like I said, the Blue Jackets, to start the year, are 5-3-1, which if you told anyone that Columbus would have a positive record to start the year, I don't think anyone would believe you. More interestingly, they've actually been pretty balanced. They've scored an okay amount of goals, around 35 goals for, and they've not conceded loads, just 25 goals against, which is actually only one more goal against than the Jets have conceded. So Columbus to start the year, perhaps a little stingier than people were expecting. And it's not like the Blue Jackets are the craziest team, but it just seems like they've been getting good contributions from up and down the lineup. And I think that this is a team that, given everything that's kind of happened to them even before the season started, they're looking for some really positive vibes. And I feel like everyone's kind of bought in, and things just seem to be pushing in a fairly positive direction. Leading their scoring is Kirill Marchenko, followed by our old friend Sean Monahan. He's a point per game right now, seems to be doing pretty well for himself. And then, of course, you've got some more familiar names like Werenski, Chinnikov, and Sillinger. Fantilli's still kind of warming up. Johnson also still kind of warming up. They've not had crazy starts to the season, although Johnson has missed a few games. So this is an interesting team that's got a mixture of some veterans leading the way, also backed up by some young kids who look like they could be really bright parts of this team's future. And I know that things are probably feeling not great right now, but for a Blue Jackets team that I think could have really gone off the rails at the start of the season, they've really rallied. And even without Goudreau anymore, I think that this is a team that's still finding its way. They lost a really close friend, and I just can't imagine what that locker room must be like, how close it is now, and having gone through this horrendous tragedy. They have really rallied to start the season, and I think that this is a team that really believes in itself and believes in one another. And so far, it seems to be paying off, and I think that they're a really a good story to sort of rally around. You don't often have human stories that I think are really worth celebrating in the NHL, but this is one that if the Jets were to lose to this team, I don't think anyone could really be upset. It'd be hard to be mad at a Jackets team getting a big win against a tough Jets team. And really, that's kind of the narrative that it would sort of be, right? Because Winnipeg now has a reputation of being a tough team. And you look at this Blue Jackets lineup, and they're pretty young all around. You've got Chinikov, Monahan, and Marchenko up front. Sillinger, Fantilli, and Pitia, I think is how you say his name, on your second line. Aston Reese, Danforth, and Olivier on your third line. And then JVR, Corrali, and LeBlanc on your fourth. So obviously this team doesn't perhaps have the craziest scoring up front. This is a squad that's still sorting out who's going to be the biggest source of offense. I think, that first line, everyone's going to really lean on them. And then, a lot of the kids like Fantilli, Johnson, when he gets back, a lot of these guys are going to have to step up and become really key parts of this team's present and future. But it seems like, all signs pointing to Columbus having a fairly solid season, a team that, a lot of people, myself included, probably didn't expect to be starting out with a fairly good record. But, no one also predicted that things would happen the way that they have, right? Nobody expected that the good, Johnny Gaudreau and his brother would pass. I don't think anyone anticipated that, a team like Columbus would have such a devastating loss even before the beginning of the year. And so for them to have the start that they have, I think is an incredible story and one that should really be celebrated. On defense, you've got Werenski and Provorov, Christensen and Severson, and Johnson and Harris. So this blue line group is okay. I don't think it's great. Obviously, Werenski's very talented. Provorov is whatever. And Severson, he's had years where he's been a fun offensive blue liner. Always hard to tell with him how good he really is. You look at the way that he defends and stuff, and sometimes the numbers are there, but it just it seems a little bit odd with his game. But so far, so good for his start to the year. And then Harris, of course, coming over in the Line A trade, which, Jordan Harris, pretty decent defender, nice third pairing guy, and probably a legit upgrade for a team that honestly has a very bright defensive pipeline. And I think that future for that team is looking pretty good. So Columbus, I think, is going to be a tougher out. Now, Winnipeg did just beat a team that maybe has a somewhat similar composition in Detroit. I don't think the Red Wings are nearly as talented in some ways, but still, if you look at the line compositions and stuff, there is some similarity, right? A little bit top heavy, maybe a so-so bottom six. Maybe Detroit even has a slightly more well-rounded bottom six, but I think the Blue Jackets, fair to say, they have a much better defense. So very interesting group in that they've got Merzlikins and Tarasov. So, this could be a tough opponent, but it's interesting because, the Blue Jackets are also dealing with a fairly large number of injuries. Gudbranson, Voronkov, Jenner, Brindley, and Johnson, they're all out, some on IR. So going to be a tough couple of weeks while guys get healthy, I'm sure. But the Blue Jackets, again, continue to be a tough out. They've won the last couple of games they've played. They beat the Islanders in a 2-0 affair, and then really embarrassed the Oilers. They did fall to the to the Predators 4-3 in overtime, but also have beaten Toronto and Buffalo, as well as Colorado over the last couple of weeks. Their only losses came to teams like the Panthers and Wild, which are actually doing pretty well to start the year. So you've got a Stanley Cup champion and Minnesota, who's really been a tough out. So it seems like Columbus is hanging around with some of the bigger teams out there. And I think the Jets probably qualify as one of those squads that for Columbus would be a really big victory if they pull it off. And for the Jets, definitely an opponent on the road that you really can't sleep against. And I think Winnipeg could be in for a pretty close affair. I'm going to say that this game is going to be 4-3, maybe. I expect it to be tough. I expect it to be fast. And I'm curious to see how the Jets handle what could be a tough opponent, and a much tougher opponent than I think a lot of people really expected to start the year. So all that said, regardless of the final scoreline, it's really hard to root against this Blue Jackets team. I wish them nothing but the best this season. And after everything that they've been through, it's a really inspiring story. And I think that more than anything should be the biggest takeaway. But, tomorrow should be a good game. I'm looking forward to it. And I do wonder if maybe the Jets do their own tribute or something. Sometimes, teams have come in and done something. So we'll see with that. But of course, Winnipeg does have another game over the weekend, and this opponent could be even more challenging. It is the Tampa Bay Lightning, who seemingly have started to put 2 and 2 together. They are beating some really good opponents, and for the Jets, that means that it's going to be a very difficult out. Even though Winnipeg will be playing at home, they're going to be facing a tough Lightning team that's down teams like Washington, Nashville, Colorado, and these are some of the better offenses out there. So we'll chat about what to expect from this game in just a little bit. But before we go too much further, did want to send our friends, at FanDuel and let you know about their great offer. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Obviously, this is a fun start to the year for the NFL. Just about 8 weeks in, and things have been crazy. As a Ravens fan, I felt lots of emotions. Vikings fans probably in a similar boat. Commanders fans, you are just loving life. And if you are starting to get a hunch maybe in the middle of one of these games, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're living up to your hunch and placing your bets. FanDuel also gives you all of the other tools that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. To get started, just visit FanDuel.com. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's all at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey friends, and welcome back to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everybody, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're chatting about Winnipeg's upcoming slate of games this weekend. First, Columbus, which will be a tough one on the road, and then at home on Sunday in the afternoon, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern, Winnipeg is taking on Tampa Bay, and this might be one of the strongest opponents the Jets have faced so far. Tampa Bay, I think, is second in the Atlantic, and they're sporting a 7-3-0 record. They've scored a fair number of goals. They really haven't conceded loads. They're on a 3-game winning streak, which could come to an end actually tomorrow because they are going to be taking on Minnesota. And the Wild have been a real pain in the butt to get through. Minnesota, very stingy. One of those teams that Winnipeg knows all too well is an absolute pain in the butt because they're defensively sound. And, maybe they don't have as much firepower as some of the top teams out there, but they can be an absolute bear to get past. So that'll be interesting to watch. But for Winnipeg, you can expect to see some very familiar names, although you're going to be missing one, and that's Stamkos because he's in Nashville. So obviously Stamkos, maybe in his later years, not as important to Tampa Bay's success as he once was, but still a fairly big loss. All that said, really hasn't seemed to slow them down too much. Gensel, Point, and Kucherov anchor the top line, and I actually keep forgetting Gensel is with Tampa Bay. I don't even remember that happening, to be honest. Last offseason was a little bit crazy and all over the place. But Gensel makes a lot of sense for this team. I think that he's a very sensible swap for Stamkos, and he's a super, super talented scorer. Would have loved Jake in Winnipeg at some point, but obviously I don't think Winnipeg probably could have given him the contract that he wanted. And, he's going to go to a team that he feels is like a top-end contender, which, unfortunately for the Jets, a lot of people haven't seen them that way, but they might start soon. On their second line, you've got Hagel, Cirelli, and Geekie. You know me, I'm a huge Cirelli fan. He's a guy that I wished Winnipeg at some point had tried to go for. I actually think the Jets may have had some interest in him. He's always been rumored as a trade target for Winnipeg's center situation since, let's be honest, Winnipeg's center depth offensively is not as great as some of the other teams out there. But for Tampa Bay, they're probably thrilled to have kept him around because he continues to be a great middle six option and a guy who, in the absence of many better options, has become their de facto 2C behind Point. Hagel, really a big pain in the butt player. He's just good. Everyone kind of jokes his name is like Bagel or whatever, but make no mistake, that guy is a great forechecker and a great scorer. and kind of, I guess, has a little bit of Verhage in him too. On your third line, obviously we have some old friends here. Yzerman, we haven't seen him in a while, but Yzerman has come to Tampa Bay and has apparently earned himself a solid role. I don't know that he's really blown the doors off, but it will be kind of fun if he's, having a solid game against the Jets. Old Winnipeg players seemingly do well in games against Winnipeg. I just hope that he doesn't score. He can have all the fun and great scoring chances he wants, no goals if possible. Then you've got Nick Paul and Mitchell Chaffee alongside him. And then on the fourth line, Girgensons, Glendening, and Atkinson. I'll be honest, I didn't realize Glendening and Girgensons were still in the league. Girgensons, I do kind of see being around, but Glendening, I totally forgot about. If you look at this bottom six, I think the Jets have a pretty sizable advantage. I think the biggest question for me is how the top lines go against the Jets' top lines, because honestly, I think the point line is going to be a huge problem for the Scheifele line, unless, Mark's unit gets going again like they did against Detroit. But I think this team's going to be faster and more put together than the Red Wings are, so I'm not sure I'm expecting that. And if they start to struggle, I do wonder if, Arniel, having already shown his hand about how he maybe thinks about this line, kind of goes back to the same well and maybe switches it back to what we saw at the end of the Leafs game. Would be interesting, and certainly not a change that I'd be against, to put it lightly. But, with Ehlers maybe not having his strongest start to the year, anything that can get him and some of his line mates going as well would probably be beneficial. On defense, this unit is obviously, okay. Without Sergachev, it's not as deep as it once was. But, you've got Hedman and Moser. I do actually like Moser a lot. I think that that's a pretty okay swap for Tampa Bay. On the second pairing, you've got McDonough and Cernak. And on the third pairing, Liljeberg and Radish. I got to be honest, I also routinely forget McDonough is on Tampa Bay. This is a team apparently where I just have forgotten a lot of players have signed there and gone there. I think because of their reputation and who they are, they've acquired a lot of bigger names over the years towards the end of their careers, and also some players like Maroon who've gone there when, they could sign cheap deals and chase rings. So this team always has a very interesting composition. You never quite know year in and year out what you're getting with them. But the one constant outside of Point and Hedman is probably Vasilevsky. He is not having the best of starts to his season. I'm hearing a lot of interesting things about him. You don't see like loads of goals against for this team, but apparently Vasilevsky maybe hasn't been as strong to start the season. He's one of those guys where I think he has incredible reflexes, but sometimes his reads and stuff are a little bit funky. I mean, he's got a 9.11 on the season so far, which is actually fairly above league average this year. So I don't know if I'm reading a lot into some of the criticisms of him yet. I think he's, maybe not as good as he once was, and I think the past couple of seasons have started to reflect that. But, on his day, he can still be a very difficult goalie to get past. And with, goaltending around the league generally suffering quite a bit, anyone who's getting you above 905 is probably doing a half-decent job. So Winnipeg really can't, slack off. I would expect him to start. The backup is Jonas Johansson. I don't remember much of it about Johansson at all. So I wouldn't, focus too much on him. But I think for Winnipeg's purposes, we'll probably be seeing Vasilevsky, because Johansson's numbers for Tampa Bay, not looking too hot. If he's in net against the Jets, I would definitely pick Winnipeg to have a sizable advantage. Not because, Tampa Bay can't outscore those problems, but, Winnipeg's offense has done a good enough job, and, the power play and stuff really kind of, makes up for any issues that the 5v5 play may have with some crazy finishing and stuff. So for the Jets, this is going to be an interesting weekend. We're going to start seeing some really good teams coming through here over the next couple of games, and Columbus, Tampa Bay, some of the first more positive records they've seen in the last couple of games. And after that, you suddenly start the sprint towards the end of November, and November 28th, which is American Thanksgiving. That's really where the Jets want to be in a playoff spot. And so far, they're looking pretty good. But in a little bit, I did kind of want to talk about that sprint to Thanksgiving, because for the Jets, it's going to be a bit of a tough grind. They've got around 13 or so games until then, which, some of these opponents are some of the best teams the Jets have faced all year. So we'll chat about that road ahead in just a little bit. But before we go too much further, did want to shout out our friends and partners at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. Just pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot up to 100 times your cash. And if you're wondering why you should pick PrizePicks, it's because PrizePicks always puts their customers first. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. And when your picks hit, you can get your money in as little as 15 minutes. They now offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account, which makes getting in on the action easier and faster than ever. And if you're worried about, maybe having a lineup that's not perfect or has an injury, no worries. Even if your picks don't hit or somebody gets injured, your lineups will always stay live, which is great because, again, you get as little as 4 correct picks, and you could win up to 100 times your money. That's all with PrizePicks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's just guaranteed. If you're thinking about maybe the upcoming games this weekend, it might be worth putting some money on Kyle Connor scoring, maybe a goal, more than a goal and a half over the next game or two. He's been on a hot streak. In terms of shots on goal, he's been lighting it up. So might be a fair bet to say he's going to get more than some of his previous totals. So if you want to get in on the action, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Hey friends, and welcome back to tonight's episode for Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are wrapping up this extra spooky Halloween special with some thoughts about the next holiday milestone, if you will. Really, for the NHL, probably one of the more important ones. It is American Thanksgiving. And American Thanksgiving, obviously, for the NHL is often said to be the deadline for which teams really want to be in a playoff spot. Now, it's really not the final be-all, end-all, but it's probably a fair barometer at this point in the season to where, most teams are going to start settling, right? At that point, you're probably about 25-ish games into the season, 20 to 25, and that's kind of where you want to get a better sense of what a real or a team really is, right? You've figured out their offense, their special teams, and, things can certainly change later in the year, but at least until the trade deadline, you probably are looking at, what the team is going to be like going forward. And the Jets schedule from here on out gets to be pretty difficult. Obviously, like I just talked about earlier, they've got Columbus and Tampa Bay through the weekend. And then next week, they get to face a bunch of Central Division opponents. For the first time ever, they'll be taking on Utah, which is really awesome. What's very convenient is that those 3 games against the Central, starting with Utah, are all at home. We love a good home stand, especially against some of the more offensively aggressive teams out there. Utah is very loose, but very fast, and they score a lot of goals, and they concede just as many. So that could be a really high-flying affair. Jets versus Avalanche is interesting because Colorado right now is dealing with one of the worst injury issues and outbreaks across the whole league. I would literally say that half of their lineup is probably injured. Ross Colton is now slated to miss several weeks after getting a bad injury in the previous game. And so they are just not having a particularly great time. I think if you're the Jets, this is an opponent that you probably want to take advantage of. Quite literally, they've got 7 guys injured, including players like Landeskog, Nichushkin, Lehkonen, Drouin, Colton, Wood, and Pullman. So, that's about half your forward grouping. And obviously Nichushkin, not really an injury-related thing, but still out all the same. So that could be a big opportunity for the Jets. And then Winnipeg probably takes on their Central Division title contender in the Stars over the weekend. Saturday, November 9th, the Jets are going to be taking on Dallas. And if you want a preview of what a big Western Conference finals quality matchup could look like, Jets versus Stars might be it. I think that's going to be a dogfight. Thankfully, it's on home ice. really hoping the Jets show up and put on a good show for the fans because I think that could be a really fun game. Then Winnipeg is going to start hitting the road for a couple of games. They'll take on the Rangers, who are also probably one of the top teams in the league. They are strong defensively. They are strong offensively, a very good team, and they're backed by an elite goaltender. So if you want a team that kind of has the Jets model right now, the Rangers are probably that squad, and they do it just a little bit better at even strength. Then you've got Tampa Bay and our old friend with Paul Maurice. You've got 2 straight games of the Panthers, a home and home, which is pretty fun. First, the Jets will go on the road on the 16th and then come back home on the 19th for a late evening matchup with the Panthers. Paul Maurice has said that he wants the Jets to win the Cup this year. Crossing fingers, his prediction holds true, and we actually get it. I guess I can't really call it a prediction, but it's a nice little gesture, and hopefully the Jets can actually live up and come away with a big championship run this year. Just winning more than one playoff game would be a nice start at least, right? That's probably all I'm asking for at this point. Then to get to the latter part of the month, the Jets are going to be taking on Pittsburgh, then the Preds for the first time, followed by Minnesota and LA, which basically closes out the Thanksgiving stretch. The day after Thanksgiving, which is actually funny enough, my birthday on the 29th, will be Vegas. So the Jets have like a really, really, really tough slate of games here. They've got, a Stanley Cup winner twice. They've got some of the best teams in the league like Dallas and New York. If you really want to know what this team is made of, this is probably the biggest stretch. And I think this is where the Jets' record might start to slip a little. And I'm not necessarily hoping for it. I'm just saying, given how tough the schedule is, I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets start to get closer to like 500 during this specific stretch. Because they've already banked a 9-1 record, they'll still have a great run for a playoff spot. But I think you're probably going to see a few losses peppered in here with the quality of opponents. And, the Jets are still trying to figure out their top 6 and how to really get it going. So I think this may be where we start to see if, Arniel maybe runs out a little bit with the patience from some of the top line issues. I know that they had a really big response game against Detroit. I just, given the quality of opponents that we're likely to face, not so sure Winnipeg is going to be able to sustain that, but we'll see, right? The nice thing is that when the even strength play is not so great, the special teams, whether it's the PK or the power play, have been more than enough to lift the Jets so far, and they continue to be really Winnipeg's biggest strengths right now outside of the goaltending. So we'll see how that goes. But either way, I'm excited for November. This is really, to me, part of the heart of the season and where it really feels like the team is starting to ramp up and things are getting exciting. A 9-1 start already to the beginning of the year. You couldn't ask for much more. And it gives the Jets a lot more breathing room if they start to stumble here over the next few weeks. But December should be a good time. A lot of home games for the Jets. Obviously we love a good home stand. Right at the end of the year, Winnipeg will have a couple of really fun games against the Central Division. So really looking forward to the season. At some point, obviously, in what is it, like February, you've got that Four Nations tournament thing. So, yeah, should be a fun time. But at least until the American Thanksgiving break, the Jets have a tough schedule, and I'm hoping that they come away with a big, big record. So let me know what you're thinking the Jets are going to finish with. I'd say over the next 13 games, I would maybe hope for like 7 or 8 wins. I think that that's fair, and I think that that would be a pretty good record. But let me know what you think the Jets will finish with in the comments below, or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. We'll have coverage of Winnipeg versus Columbus tomorrow evening. So see you then. And as always, have a great night and go Jets go.